Hi, welcome to the WARC Podcast. I'm Anne-Marie Kerwin, America's editor, and today we're going to be talking about TV. So, marketing effectiveness is under real pressure. Budgets are tight, and attention is fragmenting, and marketers have lost confidence in what drives growth. But one channel caught in this crossfire is television. It's often dismissed as a traditional channel, but yet it still is a proven multiplier of performance. So today we're going to explore how TV became the overlooked performance multiplier and why that needs to change. So this episode is being created in partnership with the marketing architects, and we're joined by two guests. First up is Angela Voss, CEO of Marketing Architects. Hello, Angela.
Hi, Anne. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
And we also have our very own Alex Brownsell, who is our head of content for WARC Media. Hello, Alex.
Hello, thanks for having me.
So WARC and Marketing Architects have just launched a new report, TV as the Full Funnel Channel, an evidence-based guide to understanding television's impact. And it's really a concise handbook for marketers looking to understand the research behind TV's role in media plans. So let's get into it. Angela, there's a lot that marketing architects and work actually have in common. One being our blue brand color. Blue's the best color. And it's a distinctive asset that we both use to represent marketing effectiveness. So I've seen your agency double down on this evidence based approach to marketing effectiveness. Why is that so important to your agency?
Yeah, I was just chatting with our marketing team this morning, trying to get my head straight on who had the distinctive blue first. And our chief marketing officer, Elena Jasper, reminded me that we both did a rebrand at the same time, and neither one of us knew that we were going after what we
Great
call
brains think
protagonist
alike.
blue. Yes, that was clearly we were channeling each other as the effectiveness color. So your question, Anne, is so great. Why is marketing effectiveness so important to us? It really grounds everything we do in evidence versus in opinion. I just feel the landscape we plan is flooded with a lot of noise. New trends, unverified claims, and effectiveness research provides the data and the discipline that separates real impact from illusion. It allows us to prove versus just claim that our strategies drive measurable growth for our clients. And for an agency like us, to your point, we ground ourselves in television as that is all we do, linear CTV and a little bit of OTT. That really matters profoundly for us. We've built our reputation on transforming how brands grow through TV and technology, and effectiveness research gives us the proof points and the frameworks to show that our approach works so that we can connect creative strategies, media strategies, all of the analytics into a single accountable system. It protects us from chasing the shiny object of the moment and reminds us what the evidence actually says about how advertising builds brands and drives sales.
Terrific. And so, Alex, I know that this report we've just launched today follows on a report you recently just published on global ad trends that really centered on television. So, why did we look into television for that report this time?
Yeah, it's a good question because I think there's always a good reason to look at what's happening in TV. Particularly obviously over the last 10 years with everything that's been going on. But I suppose there's a couple of things I think we've seen in markets like the US where we've maybe started to reach a tipping point in terms of viewing with streaming, non-linear broadcast viewing, reaching a certain threshold. There's also been a lot of noise around video sharing platforms like YouTube being viewed on TV devices. Do they constitute TV? So I think there's a real challenge to sort of some of our previous definitions of TV. So it just felt like a really opportune moment to take a look really and see what we mean by TV in 2025 going into 26 and what it means for advertisers.
That's great. So let's unpack a little bit of the landscape. Why do we think effectiveness is under threat, and where does TV fit in? So, Angela, why do you think TV is now reaching a point where it's a little misunderstood? And what do you think marketers should do to rethink television in 2025, 2026?
Yeah, I feel really blessed to have landed in the marketing world. You're just constantly challenged by new thinking. We're surrounded by really bright people, but I do think that some of the industry has lost sight of the fact that advertising really has two jobs. building that long-term demand and capturing short-term sales. Most modern marketing plans focus almost exclusively on the second of capturing those short-term sales, pouring budgets into channels um, that can be measured in real time and optimized around those immediate results. But as the report explains, as we've collaborated on together, that imbalance leaves one of marketing's essential tasks, which is fueling that mental availability and driving that future demand, underfunded and undervalued. The over reliance on narrow attribution and short term metrics has really caused marketers to underestimate TV's true impact. Linear spend has declined much faster than actual viewing, which just signals that, or not that, TV has lost its effectiveness, but that flawed measurement systems have made its contribution harder to see, a little muddy. TV is really built for scale and memory creation, which are the ingredients that sustain growth over time, but most models are rewarding only what can be clicked or tracked today. And so this misunderstanding has led to one of the greatest missed opportunities in advertising. I mean, I think about the 95/5 rule highlighted by LinkedIn's B2B Institute shows that roughly 95% of potential buyers are out of market at any given moment. Only 5% are actively shopping. But when marketers focus solely on capturing that 5%, they're abandoning the far larger opportunity to shape future demand by building brand memory and emotional connection amongst that 95%. And TV is uniquely situated to do that job. It reaches broadly, it creates shared cultural meaning. It builds the mental availability that determines which brands come to mind when buyers are finally ready to act. And the data shows that brands investing across the full funnel from awareness to advocacy enjoy higher conversion rates and lower cost per conversion. So it's never been more important for marketers to understand this because the industry is stuck in, I think, what WARC has called the advertising doom loop, a cycle of over optimizing the short term at the expense of that future growth.
Mhm. That's true, and so, Alex, what do you see in the TV landscape where where the investment is going and what's happened there?
Yeah, well, I think there's two distinct things here. I think Angela's already kind of alluded to this, but from a viewing perspective, actually, if you look at the TV market in its sort of holistic terms, actually, it's very healthy. We still know that this is something that consumers want to do in their leisure time, in their free time. They like watching high quality content on a TV device. So we know that the desire is there. What has obviously shifted is the and steadily shifting. By the way, I mean we're not seeing a sort of cliff edge fall here. Is linear TV viewing is declining and streaming viewing is increasing. As you might expect, that is more pronounced. That in terms of that sort of higher percentage of streaming viewings is more pronounced with younger audiences, older audiences. The sort of erosion in linear TV viewing is gentler. But overall, look, TV viewing is still it's very healthy, and as Angela said, what we've seen is a much more rapid drop off in investment with linear TV than we probably should have done. I think 28% over the last 10, 11 years in terms of global investment in linear TV is the figure that we cited in the report, which I think you can make a strong argument that that's unwarranted from an effectiveness, or what would be right for an effectiveness perspective. And actually, research that's been carried out in the UK by ThinkBox, which is the commercial body for TV in this market, and WPP Media found that across pretty much every product sector, if you look at what would be optimal in terms of budget allocation, there isn't a category that couldn't be spending more on linear TV and getting better results as a result of it. So, yeah.
And, part of the probably issue of, like, deciding where to invest is, like, how we're measuring TV, and, Angela, you've noted that, much of TV measurement is deeply flawed. Um, that obviously has massive implications. Alex, do you have any, idea of what the actual size of this problem is?
Yeah, look, I think that the measurement gap, as we refer to it in the report, is real and it's meaningful, and I think it is potentially resulting in investment being directed into the wrong channels for the most effective outcomes. The particular um, chart that we include in the report cites data from analytic partners where we see a 190% attribution overestimation for paid search and a minus 90 underestimation of the longer term effects of brand TV. Um, and, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to mean that if you're, a brand or a media planner, you're looking at where you're going to be allocating your budgets. If these are the metrics you're basing your decisions on, you're probably going to be making the wrong decisions ultimately for your brand.
Yeah, actually, when we were putting together a report earlier this year called the multiplier effect, what we also worked with analytic partners and with Bera AI to figure out like what does brand do to your marketing investment when you add brand into it. And what Bera found is that if you invest in brand or equity led advertising, the marketers that do that are the ones that experience the most consistent growth and they do it more efficiently. That's because they found that high brand equity scores improve a brand's ability to pull consumers through every point of the funnel, from awareness to usage to preference to advocacy. And then when we worked with analytic partners to look at how marketers were investing their marketing dollars in brand versus performance spending, we saw the same effect, basically, that Analytic Partners works with thousands of global clients across all industries and categories, and they use this spending data that they gather in the ROI Genome product to analyze what were the most effective marketing plans. And the data shows that the greatest payback comes when performance-led and equity-led advertising are both part of the mix. So much so that when they looked at clients who had been doing only performance marketing investment, and then they added an equity-led or brand building campaigns, they saw this median uplift of 90% for ROI. But if you went the other way, if you were doing both and then stripped out brand campaigns, ROI declined by a median of 40%. So that's what we dubbed the performance penalty. So there's a lot of evidence in the multiplier effect that really you need to make that investment in brand to improve your outcomes at every level. So, let's zoom in a bit on TV in terms of the impact it can have. Alex, when it comes to the marketing funnel, what does TV actually do for it?
This is a really key insight from the report and something we talked about previously as well. TV makes other channels work harder. It lifts the efficiency of performance channels, things like paid search and other parts of the digital ecosystem. And we know that TV can do the heavy lifting from a brand building perspective. It can um, create more emotional responses. Emotion, we know, builds memory structures, and those memory structures then make activation subsequently more efficient. And analytic partners, to draw on our data again from the ROA genome, found that 30% of search clicks are triggered by other media. I think this really underlines TV's role in driving response really throughout the funnel.
Yeah, so the idea really encapsulated in the multiplier effect is that this integrated marketing effort is what really counts and what really helps marketers reach their goals. We had more research in the multiplier effect from System One that backs this up. 92% of equity building ads also perform strongly in the short term. And the way System One rates campaigns, it's by a star rating for long term growth and a spike rating for short term sales potential. Um, Angela, talk a little bit about like what you found when you look at how brand building campaigns will do both long term and short
Yeah.
term sales.
Yeah, that dual impact I think is super important when you think about TV, and it's just it's organic kinda core strengths of the channel. Attention, emotion, and scale all work on the human memory system and the immediate buying moment at the same time. The rich audiovisual storytelling of television encodes distinctive brand memories, so the brand comes to mind later while simultaneously presenting clear reasons to act now to the portion of the audience that is already in market. That's why I think that finding is so key. The system 192% of equity building ads also score strongly for short term sales potential. The same emotional, memorable work that grows future demand can also move today's buyers to respond. And then I think too, beyond the spot itself, TV amplifies the entire plan, right? It's mass reach, credibility, make other channels more persuasive and efficient. So search, digital, etc., convert better when TV is on. Back to Alex's point.
Exactly, yeah, and I think, I wanna talk a little bit about, like, how we talk about TV. I think when we say TV, most people think of it as old-timey broadcast TV, but because we have all these other words that we use for TV now, like streaming and digital. Alex, talk about, like, the definitions of TV and, like, how you unpick them in the Global Ad Trends report.
Yeah, it was tricky, truthfully, because I think there's 2 separate things here. The first point, I think, which is important to bear in mind, viewers don't really care. They certainly don't care about the industry's definitions. They are very happy to fluidly move from watching some linear broadcast television to a streaming service to a fast service to watching a video sharing platform like YouTube on their TV device. They don't seem to, they live in a sort of more borderless, boundaryless kind of ecosystem. But this does matter from the industry's perspective. This is one of the reasons why we really wanted to look at it for the Global Ad Trends report, because as we know, there are different ways of buying and planning and measuring linear broadcast and um, connected TV. Certainly, historically, we know that TV is regulated in a way that YouTube content isn't. For instance, that editorial mark of quality. We know that historically, that TV has brought certain effectiveness benefits in terms of, for instance, co-viewing that we don't get from someone just watching a video on their phone. So yeah, the consumer doesn't really care, but from our perspective in the industry, it matters because it matters how we plan, we buy campaigns, and it matters about how well those campaigns perform. So yeah, we I think you could have an entire podcast dedicated to definitions, but that's just some of the things that we were wrestling with.
Right, yeah, and of course, as you noted, that really does make an impact on how you do channel planning, right? Because on our side, from the marketer side, if they're thinking through all these different definitions of TV, but from the viewer side, they don't care. They just are watching stuff. How does that affect channel planning, and what should marketers be doing to deploy TV when they are putting together their media plans?
Yeah, I think quote unquote TV. When we think about how marketers should think about it, we're now considering complementary formats, maybe with different jobs to do. Linear remains the anchor for scaled, predictable reach, especially around live content. And then connected TV and streaming add that flexibility and precision. Effective plans assign roles across both rather than treating them independently or as substitutes for one another. And then, despite that, most incremental video dollars have flowed to social and video platforms, including YouTube, rather than CTV. So there's a growing mismatch between where attention is fragmenting and where budgets are actually going, which is another reason to just plan holistically and not let any one platform crowd out cross TV, cross stream TV strategy. I think the biggest practical hurdle is measurement. Fragmented CTV infrastructure makes it hard to deduplicate reach and manage frequency across publishers, which is why the industry needs more standardized robust measurement across all forms of TV before planners can fully optimize cross-platform buys. Um, Linear and CTV together, using linear for guaranteed breadth and CTV for its unique strengths around targeting, regional strengths, agility, while pushing partners towards unified cross-string metrics and verification so that you can manage that overlap and prove incremental reach so that you can align budget with that real viewing behavior.
And, speaking of budgets, all of this means that marketers actually have to be willing to invest in marketing. So when, we look at the advice that we get around brand and performance splits in your media investment, Analytic Partners ROI Genome says that at least 3 in 10 ad dollars should go towards equity-led advertising. And the most impactful advertisers actually dedicate 50% or more of their budgets to brand, sometimes even higher. So, Angela, what do you think marketers get wrong when it comes to allocating budget to TV?
Well, I think traditionally TV was the most expensive channel. So you can't fault people for thinking of it as a cost center rather than as an asset that compounds, which is what it really is. Too often, investment decisions are made inside windows that are too narrow. What can be proven right now, and that's the wrong time frame for an equity-driven channel. As the report speaks to, equity does take time to build. It pays off more in the long run. Brand building impacts both current and future buyers with effects that continue to multiply over time. But back to measurement, marketers frequently shift dollars away from TV the moment a dashboard doesn't reflect that immediate ROI, missing the fact that TV is driving the demand of other channels, potentially later capture. So the fix starts with reframing the time itself as the strategic variable. Marketers need to evaluate ROI over a longer horizon as a compounding growth system. That means embracing what the data already tells us, that at least 3 in 10 ad dollars should go towards equity-led work. The most effective brands dedicate 50% or more of their budgets to it. And when we help clients calibrate to that range and model performance over 6 to 12, potentially even 24-month periods, the returns become undeniable. Over time, the cost per conversion drops, the efficiency of performance media increases, and the brand becomes easy to buy, easy to remember, and ultimately drives more sales.
Mhm. And, Alex, I know, as part of the global ad trends report, you were looking at, whether or not TV is too expensive. So, put talk to me about, like, how TV is priced and whether it's too cost prohibitive for challenger brands or why people should be thinking about that investment differently if they should.
Yeah, there's a few different things to say about the cost of TV, and I think Andrew has just sort of pointed out. Historically, I think TV was seen as as a big part of budgets. Uh, it did cost more than certain other channels, and then you had this kind of event around 2019 to 2022 when TV prices seemed to leap up. There was a lot of noise in the industry about inflation. Um, I think that there's a couple of things. One, that wasn't necessarily completely across the board. In markets like the US, we did see a fair bit of inflation. In others, like Brazil and Japan, for instance, TV is actually cheaper now than it was 6 or 7 years ago. But the costs aren't necessarily what they seem. Certainly, once you start accounting for inflation, so in real terms, the rise in TV prices that we saw over that period was significantly less um, than it maybe did on actually one or two of the charts that we produced in the report, which some clever folks did point out to us on LinkedIn. So putting our hands up there, that we probably should have flagged the impact of inflation. But the second point is it's the effectiveness issue, which is TV isn't necessarily an efficiency buy. It's something that as we've talked about, it's something that anchors your campaigns. It makes other, when it's sort of right integrated into your campaign, it makes everything else work harder. It makes your performance work harder. So I think that marketers need to sometimes strip out the sort of worrying about the sort of specific numbers and think about the broader impact of TV.
The other thing I would add to that, Anne, is that traditional buying practices have been in play for a long time. And as technology has advanced and the landscape has fragmented, many buying practices haven't kept up with, potentially what media pricing should be. So there are smarter ways to be buying that does bring TV costs down, and makes the channel more accessible to more brands.
That's terrific, yeah, because nobody wants to waste media dollars, right? So, one of the things we were talking about earlier was the, ability of TV to really tell that emotional storytelling, and so it's really important that the creative that you have in those campaigns really works. Angela, what's your approach to creative that performs and what makes a TV ad effective?
Yeah, I think for us, it definitely starts with emotion, but also is very clear and helpful to the consumer. That's back to advertising has 2 jobs and the 95/5. I think System 1's data was a wake-up call. half of the world's ads are less engaging than a video of a cow eating grass. And that dullness is costing brands nearly 190 billion in wasted potential. That just tells us that the issue isn't just what we spend, it's also what we put on screen. We see effectiveness in creative as a balance between art and discipline, emotional storytelling that builds memory and connection, paired with the structural elements that drive clear response. And so in practice, that means every campaign must do two jobs. We need to build and we need to nudge. We build by creating emotionally resonant, repeatable worlds that audiences can return to and remember. And we nudge by weaving in reasons to act now that feel natural within that larger story. I think the best performing TV ads don't try to shout the hardest. They make people feel something first, and that emotion becomes the shortcut that makes the brand come to mind in that buying moment. So, our approach combines proven creative principles, story, character, music, distinctive assets with technology like our ScriptSooth proprietary, our synthetic audience message pre testing platform that predicts how audiences will emotionally respond before an ad ever hits the air. And the goal on that is to produce work that audiences actually enjoy watching and that brands can build upon. When your creative is emotionally engaging, strategically grounded, and a part of a platform that evolves over time, that's when TV advertising stops feeling like spend and starts working like investment. You start to see that in the outcomes for your brand.
So we covered why this matters, what TV delivers, and how to make it work harder. For the group, let's just go around and say if we could write a billboard that every marketer in the industry saw every day on their way into work, what would you have it say?
I am always on a never ending mission to get enough protein in my life. And so I was thinking about that. And like, because that would call to me anything about protein. So I thought clicks are sugar, brand is protein.
That's excellent. Yeah. Alex, did you have any thoughts about a billboard?
I mean, the one that's sort of screaming in my head right now because I was talking about it earlier, but efficiency and effectiveness are not the same thing. Just really want to hammer that message home.
Hmm. That's an excellent one too. And I would go back to our multiplier effect and say that it's not brand plus performance, it's brand times performance. It's not plus, it's times. You're going to get more when you have an integrated marketing plan. So, what do we think are the most important things to remember when it comes to planning TV campaigns? What would be our takeaways? Angela?
Yeah, I would say TV delivers more than broad awareness. Let's not just assume the channel only drives awareness. It also has a job to do and does it well in terms of driving immediate sales. So let's think of it in terms of bothism. It creates emotional connections that drive memory, trust, and long-term preference. And at that same time, it boosts the performance of other channels. It delivers measurable sales impact in the short term. Right now and here today, there's always buyers out there, so let's capture them.
That's great. Thank you. Alex, did you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, I think we should probably acknowledge that, a lot of marketers who may be listening to this, um, uh, that this isn't necessarily an easy time to be marketing, that economically there are lots of challenges at the moment, and a lot of these folks are gonna be under pressure to deliver really quick wins. And to deliver those quick wins, I think many of them are leaning into tactics that, may seem to work in the short term, but ultimately erode long-term brand strength. We know that we talked about that there's these fragmented, measurement models that are distorting what really works. I think it's never been more urgent and important to reframe how we plan and how we value TV.
I would just add that, hearkening back to the multiplier effect, which is my favorite report of the year, that really marketers who plan their marketing as a platform rather than one off campaigns also reap benefits outsized um, to other approaches that are more scattershot. So when you have like that emotionally resonant creative with clear calls to action, TV can drive long term brand value and short term results. So just because you're doing the brand building doesn't mean you're necessarily waiting for the payoff. as one of the analytic partners guys told me, he's like, all advertising works. It's just how do we measure how it works? So that's good to remember that all advertising actually does work. Thank you, Alex, and thank you, Angela, for joining me for this. Anyone who would like a copy of the evidence we talked about in this episode, you can download the new report, TV as a Full Funnel Channel. It's available now on WARC.com. It's linked in the description to this episode. Thanks so much for listening to the WARC Podcast, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss another episode.